About a year ago, City Council tasked the city manager, Mark Ralph, and his team to go out into the community and have a conversation about shared values that would help the City Council to come up with a vision for the future of Littleton and what we hope it would be or how we can get there sometime, a kind of a guiding map type thing. The process was incredible to watch and participate in. Ultimately, the City Council did adopt a vision as well as the 5 guiding principles that you're going to see tonight. It's a product of creativity, shared vision, incredible passion, and a love for Littleton that the citizens of Littleton have. The vision is a guiding principles that have put us into a position where we can finally update our comp plan, which hasn't been updated for decades. It also put us in a position where we can now create the first ever for the city of Littleton, the transportation master plan. Would have come in handy about 30, 40 years ago. We kicked off the Envision plan just last month. This speaker series is a tool that City Council is going to use to try to keep as many people involved as possible. I'm very impressed by this turnout, to all of you showing up tonight. There's a lot more people that would like to come, but it's my understanding that it was a limited amount of seats here, and so there's a lot of other people that wish they would have been here. So next time you put this out, I guess you make sure you get your names in early. Tonight will be a chance for you to learn about current conditions of the city of Littleton, as well as how Littleton fits into the region and also the state. To get us started tonight, I am pleased to welcome Aubrey Weaver, a storyteller. She's going to tell us a story about the city of Littleton, or a story in the city of Littleton. So if you would please join me in welcoming Aubrey.
All right, well, thank you for that introduction. As he said, I am Aubrey Weaver. I am a current sophomore at Heritage High School, and I am going to be speaking to you today about my experiences growing up in Littleton, along with what it's like to exist as a member of Littleton's youth. So my earliest involvement in Littleton was probably through the local youth sports, like Littleton Lollipop Soccer. And once I made the tradition into early education that too had its roots in Littleton, I was the first graduating class of my preschool at Primrose Preschool, which is right across from Littleton Academy. And from there, I continued on to my higher education, which also had its roots in Littleton, as Runyon Elementary School, Euclid Middle School, and currently in Heritage High School. Even though I was the student, I was not the only one in my family that was involved in Littleton schools. My mother has been through the various ranks of PTO for about 11 years now, and my grandparents have been volunteering in first grade since I made my way through first grade about 10 years ago. Involvement in Littleton Public Schools opened the doors to many other events in this community, like the Stride for Education. Outside of school projects, other events that my family enjoys attending is the Littleton Free Museum concerts that they have over here. I've been going since I was about 3 or 4. And another favorite, which isn't pictured here, is the Littleton Elks Car Show that I enjoy with my grandpa every year. As I got older and continued through middle school, I realized that there were more ways that I could involve myself in my community. In 2016, I joined the South Suburban Youth Commission, and I've been on the board for 3 years, the past 2 serving as their secretary. But one of my favorite Littleton extracurriculars is the summer Littleton Town Hall youth performances that they do. I've been in the program since 2nd grade, and this was last year's performance of Once Upon a Mattress. Even through all of these amazing experiences, I don't think I ever fully embraced how special Littleton is until I had the opportunity to show it to someone from another culture. This is Ellen. She's from Belgium, and she stayed with us through a global host family program called Up With People. While with us, we would do all sorts of fun community things like eating at local restaurants, taking small business shopping trips. We did yoga, and we took her to the Western Welcome Week fireworks and concert we have. Through my experiences with Ellen, I realized that Littleton is a place I am proud to show off, and a place that I am extremely fortunate to have grown up in. I know that wherever college or life may take me, that Littleton will always be here with the same energy and good people that have always been here when I come back. I wouldn't trade my memories or history here in Littleton for anything in the world. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Relf. I'm the city manager here for our city of Littleton. And thank you, Aubrey, once again. Appreciate that. Very nice. I'd like to talk a little bit about why we're here. And, you know, we hear from Aubrey about her love and her passion for our city of Littleton. And I, too, have a passion here for not only our city, but also for the work we're about to do. And I really have to commend our city council for taking on the tough work. What we're about to try to accomplish here by October, keep our fingers crossed, is that we're going to formally update our comprehensive plan and a transportation master plan, an economic analysis of all that, and in essence, establish a true vision for us to execute over time. Tough work. But I also would like to, kind of acknowledge the fact that we've had a lot of people here in this room, and certainly even before all of us, who have built a great city. It is unique. We have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot that we want to, in essence, protect. We have a quality of life, in my opinion, that's unique. And I think what we're trying to do here in this process with our comp plan is for us to, as our Mayor Pro Tem stated, is to establish that common vision. We are at a very unique point in history for our city of Littleton. Right now, we're going to be making probably one of the most significant policy decisions this city will ever make. Truly, I have said this publicly, that once this is accomplished, our council, our planning commission, and others will stand on their shoulders by this decision for decades. Because it really is, for us, an opportunity for all of us to establish that true vision and execute that. I've been here, the city manager now for 2 years, and I've had an opportunity in another city to actually pursue the same thing twice. And I think why I have such a passion is because I know what the outcome is. I know that if we do this well, that it will be an opportunity for us to collect that vision and truly to execute it. And over time, it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate to ourselves, to our community, that we have listened, that we have a plan, that we know what our future will be, and we're going to do our best to try to make that commitment come true. So we have quite a team that's been assembled here at the request of City Council for us to kind of pursue this. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of special consultants that have long history with such projects. And so tonight is really our first opportunity for us to kind of kick off what we're calling our speaker series. It's kind of a lecture style. I'll introduce Chris Akers here in a little bit. But it really is, in my opinion, it's an opportunity for us to kind of share information, for us to kind of start a conversation. Because here in between April and August, we're going to be engaged in a pretty heavy-duty citizen engagement process. There'll be lots of conversation that goes on. We're going to be talking about future land use. What is it that we want to accomplish? What does that look like? We're going to test that with a transportation master plan. So if that's our vision for future land use, what's the transportation system that's necessary to make it successful? Can it function? And one of the other core pieces is the economic analysis. Then we're going to test the question, can we afford it? And so all of this will come together in one plan. There are other opportunities to add other elements for a comp plan, but the three I just mentioned to me are the most important and probably the basic of any comp plan. Eventually, we will talk about how housing fits into this. We all know about the price of housing in the whole Denver metro area. We have one of the highest here in the city of Littleton. It poses interesting challenges for us long term. And then economic development is also, in essence, a strategy about how we pull all this together, the future land use, transportation, housing. How are we going to accomplish that over time? So eventually we want a strategy about how to accomplish that. All right, so the other thing you'll notice that we are recording this. And so I would hope that all of you after this evening here would share this conversation that we're going to have this evening with your friends, your family, neighbors, and encourage them to kind of look to our Channel 8 and our YouTube channel. I think it is a way for us to kind of, again, push the word out. So please share that. And I have to admit, I'm pretty impressed how many people signed up for this. You know, we really didn't know what to expect. And we have roughly 80 seats. And actually, that basically sold out in 3 days. And so that really was impressive to me. I think that just demonstrate we have a lot of people in our community who have a deep, sincere love for this community and an interest about where we're going in the future. So I would welcome all of you and look forward to the next 3. So with that, Kathleen Osher, part of our team, I'm going to ask her to step up here. We're going to kind of get the energy going a little bit. We have a little bit of a quiz here to get people ask some questions about Littleton.
All right, thanks, Mark. I've gotten the chance to meet a lot of you over the course of starting the work with Envision last May, but I'm really happy tonight to have some fun with you. So you may have all noticed you have 4 colorful cards with 4 letters on each of them, A, B, C, and D. So we're going to take a quiz on Littleton. Someone said to me, we were like, oh, they have those fancy telephone polling things. You can just vote on your phone. I was like, that's not us. So if you believe A, I would like you to hold up the A if you believe B. So just in case anyone's confused, we're going to do a little warm-up question. All right, some of you may remember the 1937 Disney movie, animated film rather, Snow White, 7 Dwarfs. There was one that was less than joyful. Was it A, bashful, D, dopey, C, grumpy, or D, Doc? What's your vote? It looks unanimous, everyone, don't you think, Mark? Yes. So, all right, you guys got this. No problem. You're right. That's my validation to you, right? Okay, so next question. Great places are often compared to raising a child. I can say this myself, as most moms would attest, children go through growth spurts. My son cannot have a pair of pants that last more than 6 months, right? So what decade did Littleton experience its greatest growth spurt in terms of percentage growth? Is it A, the current decade, B, the 1950s, C, the 1990s, or D, the 1970s? We got some mixed votes. All right. I would say the majority out there is B. And you're right. The 1950s. I think almost tripling our population. All right. Next question. Everybody ready with your voting cards? Platt Park is one of the best places in Littleton to have a picnic with your family. How many football fields can you fit inside the park? Is it A, 713, B, 1,218, C, 345, D, 122? All right, get your voting cards ready. All right. Well, I got a whole mix this time. I don't even know if I see a majority. It's A, 713. All right, way to brush up on your Littleton. Okay, question number 4. I'm going to have to use my notes up here. My glasses are failing. Let's see. It can sometimes take up to 57 minutes to travel from Santa Fe and Mineral to downtown Denver in your car when traffic is at its worst. And this, of course, includes some extra time that you have to budget, about 24 minutes to ensure you arrive on time. If you're one of the lucky ones that finds a parking spot at Littleton or at Santa Fe and Mineral, how does travel on the light rail compare? A, 33 minutes, B, 40 minutes, C, 25 minutes, or D, 42 minutes? All right. Okay, I have another mix. Got a lot of C votes. I got a lot of A votes. A, 33 minutes. That sounds way better than 57. All right. Question number 5. As of 2015, Littleton had around 30,000 jobs within the city. How many of those jobs were held by people who live outside of Littleton's city limits? Is it A, 26%, B, 82%, C, 40%, or D, 92%? All right, I got a mix again. D, 92%. All you green voters. All right. All right, this is the final question. Everyone make their best vote ever, okay? As one of the healthiest states in the U.S., we all know Colorado residents love to walk. Littleton's no different. How many miles of walking trails exist in Littleton? A, 29 miles, B, 51 miles, C, 45 miles, or D, 12 miles. I got a lot of B's I see up here. All right. B's are correct. The B's have it. All right. Nice job, everyone. So I'm going to ask Mark to introduce our wonderful guest speaker tonight. Thank you so much for participating this evening. I'm glad the cards worked out so well and didn't listen to anybody about phone voting, right? So I welcome you again and thank you for being here this evening. So Mark, if you'll introduce our guest speaker.
All right, this evening, Chris Akers. He is an economist for the Colorado State Demographer Office. Chris has worked as an economist with the State Demographer Office in the Department of Local Affairs since 2015. He produces employment estimates and a long-term job forecast for Colorado and its 64 counties and county-level based industry analysis that identifies economic drivers. Chris is part of a team that does extensive outreach with local governments and other stakeholders to help them understand and use economic and demographic data and forecasts. Prior to joining DOLA, he worked 10 years as a statistical analyst with the Labor Market Information. That sounds fascinating. I hope. In the Colorado Department of Labor Employment, where he produced an array of employment and wage data. Chris has a degree in economics from Vanderbilt University. He enjoys spending time and enjoying Colorado's obviously beautiful outdoors with his wife and 3 young children. So let's welcome Chris.
All right, how many people aced the quiz? 6 out of 6? See, that's a fun thing about the phone version is we get the instantaneous feedback on the replies right there, but I could kind of scope around the room and see how the answers were coming. So I want to thank Jerry, Mark, Kathleen, Aubrey especially. Fortunately, I don't think my presentation is going to be as exciting as hers. One of my goals in mind that I have to do is to always get more pictures in mind. I have tons of charts and graphs and maps and everything, but need to get pictures of the kids and other things to personalize it a little bit more, but haven't quite got to that point yet. So you're going to be an inspiration for me to get there. Always wonderful to see a young person so passionate about his or her community, and I love to see just some of the great community events that happen here, and can imagine what a great place it would be to grow up, as I know many of you have, and many of you have also raised families here in Littleton too. My passion is really for the state of Colorado. I've lived out here for 20 years now, and really love the state. I'm fortunate that I get to work for the state and know a lot about the state. Know a lot about what we do at the county level is what we do. If we look across the state, there are 64 counties, and there's over 270 incorporated municipalities. So we don't have as great of data at the municipal level as we do at the county level overall. And that's kind of the way a lot of the data is disseminated too. When you're looking at census, a lot of stuff is done first at the national level, and then the 50 states, then the 3,200 some counties across the U.S., and then we break it down to a lot of the municipal or town levels there. So I'm going to apologize in advance that I don't have that many Littleton specific slides in my presentation, but I do have a number of them there too, and hopefully you'll just get a good feel for who is Colorado, what does Arapahoe County look like, and who is Littleton too, and that's kind of helping you kick off this whole process there as well. So I thank you again for this opportunity, and I'm really excited. I think one of the first things to talk about is what is economics and demographics, and why does it matter? Well, simply, it's all of you in this room. It's the pictures that we saw from Aubrey there. It's the people, and demographics and economics helps to answer a lot of those who, what, when, when, where, why questions that we have, and talk a lot about the people overall. A little bit like what Mark talked about. We look at housing and the relationship between housing demand and the supply of housing. We look at job numbers and job characteristics. We talk a lot about net migration to our state, but really what are the characteristics of net migration is, as Mark mentioned, with the high housing prices and everything, that you're not necessarily going to move here unless you have a job. And if you can't find a job, you might move to a lower cost place rather quickly too if you're unable to do so. Incomes are incredibly important. And when we think about incomes, it's usually that we think about our wages and salaries. And that does account for about 2/3 or 70% of our income. But as our society is aging, we're more reliant upon transfer payments, Social Security, pensions, and the like, and Medicare, Medicaid to provide for a lot of our health care there as well. So it's another way to look at our income and not just think about the dollars that we earn, but also money that comes perhaps from the federal government and Social Security checks and the like. We do a lot of work looking at economic drivers in our office as well. That's really what brings those outside dollars into a community. You can think about some of your anchor institutions that you have here in Littleton, whether it's a hospital or a telecommunications provider. Those are some of the big economic drivers that are here, but we really think of economic drivers from a regional approach. And when we look at it from our office, we take Arapahoe County and all other 7 counties in like the Denver metro area, throw in Boulder, and look at it as a region, because there's a lot of interplay. A lot of companies have multiple locations throughout the state there as well. So we lump Denver together in part of a bigger region there too, and look at really what are those things that bring outside dollars in. Is it skiers that are coming here to visit and spending their dollars that they earned elsewhere? Is it people coming to go to the National Western Stock Show? Is it someone coming here for a business meeting, or any number of other things? So that gives you some ideas there. Or is it just the federal government pension checks that are arriving in the mail that are coming from Washington, D.C., money that you earned, had taken out of your checking account, but now coming from another source right there too. And then finally, kind of pulling it all together, looking at a lot of those anchor institutions, the big parts of the community, really what makes your community tick, starting from your schools to your places where you receive your health care, your hospital, and really how do we get around town, our transportation and the like. So that really kind of ties into a lot of the work that you're doing with your transportation master plan. So hopefully all of this will help come together at the end here again and bring it full circle. But this is why I think it's very important. Any presentation that I give starts with the big picture. And this data that I have here is from the United States Census Bureau. It was released in December of this past year. And this is the population estimates as of July 1st for the nation. So the nation has about 327 million people overall. We grew by just over 2 million people to get to there from our 2017 level. However, that is the least amount of people that we've added since 1974. So that predates me by just a little bit right there. I'll be honest with you there. And if we look at the 0.6 of a percentage point growth that we experienced, that's the slowest growth that our nation has experienced since 1936, when we were coming out of the Great Depression. And I think that probably predates most of the people in this room. I'm not going to ask anyone if they were around or if they were part of that slower growth there at all either. In Colorado, though, it's a vastly different story. Colorado now has about 5.7 million people as of July 1st, 2018. We grew by roughly 80,000 people last year. Our growth rate was 1.4%. That put us at the 7th fastest growing state. You see a lot of the other states that are up there. I'm testing your postal codes right now and your knowledge of them for the sake of brevity right there, who grew faster than us. But Nevada's up there. They're the fastest growing state. They are unique, along with Arizona and Colorado on this list, that these are only 3 of the fast growing states that actually saw faster growth last year than we did in 2016. Our growth rate rounded down to 1.4. It's 1.42 actually. And last year we were 1.35%. So only Arizona that just notched up above 2%, or excuse me, Nevada just above 2%, and Arizona with a little bit faster growth is also in that group there. So we are doing better, actually accelerating our growth slightly in a time when most other places are seeing slightly decelerating growth. Since 2010, we've added over 660,000 people to our state. That comes out to an average of about 83,000 a year, or roughly 1.6% annualized growth growth rate. If we look at Littleton, Littleton's added just over 5,000, about 5,500 people or so since 2010, and that's even a faster growth rate than what the state has seen since 2010 at about 1.8% overall. So that kind of just sets the stage with the big picture and lets you see how Littleton's growth rate kind of fits in with that of the nation and that of the broader state as well. Looking around the state, the 666,000 people that we've added since 2010 are displayed by county on this chart. Now, if your county is in a shade of red, as Arapahoe County is, along with Denver County, Adams County, Weld County, and El Paso County, the county has added between 50,000 and 101,000 people, which is Denver's case, the county that has added the most people overall. Those that are in the shade of orange have added between 10,000 and 40,000. Douglas County leads that group, followed by Larimer County and the Jefferson, Boulder, also in that mix there as well. Broomfield joins that group. The tan colors have added between 10,000 and 10,000 there. And then on the flip side of the coin, we have 21 counties out of our 64, about 1/3 of our counties across the state that have lost population since 2010. So we're seeing this boom right here in the metro area and up and down the Front Range. But for a lot of our state, it does not feel that way. They feel like the recovery from the Great Recession has left them behind, and they don't feel like they have seen a lot of the opportunity to grow. So a lot of people have moved from the areas kind of in the southwest corner of the state here, the lower Arkansas Valley, northwest corner of the state, and even along Highway 76 to the metro area. So that's where some of our migration is coming, both from people moving within the state as well as people who move here from other places. California is one of the biggest places to donate people to us in terms of people moving here, about 26,000 people per year. Then other big states, Texas, Florida, Arizona, because of their proximity. And then Illinois is the place where we see the most people on net who move here every year. We had 8,100 people a year ago who moved here on net from Illinois. I joked when I gave a presentation a couple months ago about a month ago when the polar vortex was going on, and I said next year we're just going to have to shift that comma over and we'll have 81,000 people getting out of Chicago in the cold and coming here to Colorado. So we'll have to see if that plays out or not. But an important thing to note, if we think about where we are right now in Littleton, and if we tried to draw like a geographic center of where all the growth is, it would almost come right there at that confluence of Arapahoe County, Jefferson, and Douglas. So if we think about it, you're right in the heart of where most of the growth has been occurring. And part of that's due to your proximity. You could get up to Denver in, 33 minutes if everything goes well, and you get your parking spot and the like there as well. You can make it down south into Douglas County in considerably less time, and even on to El Paso County. So you have a good location there, a lot of good north-south corridors there for transit as well. Now, when we look at our population in Colorado, there's two things that move the needle on our population. The first is the natural increase. That's our births minus our deaths. And that's shown in blue bars on this chart here. And one thing that we notice is that the natural increase has been slowing overall since 2007, 2008, when we were above 41,000 for our natural increase. As our population has grown older and as we've seen fewer babies being born over the past few years, that natural increase has slowed to about 27,000 or so. So there's naturally less pressure for growth than we were experiencing a decade ago, simply due to a couple changes that I'll detail in a little bit more detail on the next slide. Now, what really is going to move the needle on our growth are these red bars. That's our net migration. My boss loves to say when she looked at this slide, when you hear about the media talking about this is the fastest growth that we've seen here and everything, they must not have been here in 1973 when we added 110,000 people and grew by 4.3%, or 3 times faster than what we were currently growing by. And honestly, I wasn't here then either. But we do see that it does have some variability. You can see the last time we had outmigration as a state was in the mid to late 80s when we had the fallout from the S&L crisis and the oil and gas bust that we experienced as well. And then we had the roaring 90s where we had a lot of growth leading up to the dot-com boom there, and then eventually the bust. So after 2000, 2001, we can see where the red bars dip quite a bit and then start to trend back up again. They peak in 2015, where we had about 100,000 that we added to our population, fall a little bit in 16 and 17, and then come in right about 80,000 is where we were in our total population growth, with, again, about 27,000 of that due to natural increase, and the other roughly 52,000 due to net migration, people moving here from other states or from another country as well. Now, this is a little bit more detail on that natural increase. If we look at the blue bar, those are the numbers numbers of babies that are born in our state over the past couple decades or so. And that peaks right around 2007, 2008, kind of 2 years in a row where we had just under 71,000 babies that were born. We've since fallen down to about 64,000 babies that have been born more recently. It's kind of ebbed around a little bit, but it's definitely below where we were at that peak from a decade ago, and we haven't quite got back up to that level of births that we were at 10 years ago there. And if we think about this cumulatively over the past decade, roughly 6,000 fewer babies than were born at that peak in 2007-8. That comes out to about 55,000 babies that were not born. Sometimes I take a moment of silence to recognize those babies that weren't there, but I think a more salient point is when we look at some of the economics of this too, when we see why Toys R Us and Babies R Us went out of business here, they have a lot fewer customers now, not to mention the fact that they have a lot of increased competition from online sources like Walmart and Amazon there as well. Now, the other trend that's pretty well defined is the red line, and those are the deaths that we're experiencing across our state. So we've seen the deaths rise from about 28,000 up to about 37,000 recently, and that's due to our aging population and simply due to population growth, with having a lot more people in our state than we did at the beginning of this time period that is shown on the chart here. Now, if I look at specifically at Arapahoe County, one of the things that we see here, again, Arapahoe County sees most of its growth through migration, a lot of strong migration growth in the 90s. After 1990, when we did see a little bit of out-migration, kind of that hangover from the S&L crisis in oil and gas, but then from 90 basically clear through 2004, there was a good amount of net in-migration. We do see in 03, 04, and then even a little bit of out-migration in 05. I think that was kind of in the wake of the dot-com bust that we've seen there, but then we do see the migration pick up again, kind of peak, very similar to where Colorado did in 15, then fell off a little bit in 16 and 17. Now, similarly, with the blue bars, it's followed a similar pattern to that of the nation, but Littleton has gone from about 5,100 natural increase, Arapahoe County, gone from 5,100 natural increase just as recently as 2009 down to 3,900 natural increase that we see just in 2017. That's a result of about 400 fewer babies being born and about 700 more deaths than we saw than just a decade ago there or so. So the natural increase in Arapahoe County also a little bit slower, a little bit less pressure on growth as the population ages and fewer babies are born as well. This chart is a little bit busy. It has the growth rate for Arapahoe County shown on the top line and the total population in Arapahoe County, and then it breaks it down by place. But if you call your attention to the far right column right here, one of the things that you'll notice, Littleton in bold, with just under 50,000 total residents at the bottom when we include the other parts of the site, few people that might live in Douglas County or Jefferson County, where the city limits go over county lines there as well. At 1.8% growth, it's one of the fastest growing bigger cities there, faster than Aurora there and faster than Centennial too. So you still are experiencing some good growth, but it really pales in comparison to the rapid growth that you saw in the 50s and 60s. And I'm sure that's probably a welcome occasion too, or the master plan and transportation plan would be a lot more difficult to do there overall. This chart looks at who moves to Colorado. This is the net migration by age from 2000 to 2010. One of the things that we notice is that there's really a defined peak there, kind of a natural bell from 23 years old up to 33 years old that we attract for our net migrants. They tend to be fairly well-educated migrants who move here with a college degree or higher. They help to fuel our economy and our workforce by moving here. Some of them bring their kids. When we look across the board, 10 years old is one of the other ones that kind of rises up there, and they would probably come with some of those 40-year-olds that we see there, where we also see a little bit more immigration. And then we also know when we look at just past 60, around 62, 63, we see a lot of immigration of that pre-retiree. Now, when we contrast this to Arapahoe County, we see that the 19 to 23-year-olds typically out-migrate from Arapahoe County. They're likely going to pursue higher education in another part of the state or in another state there as well. And Arapahoe really does a great job of attracting that 28-year-old to kind of a 32, 33-year-old. And when we look at the first-time home buying age, prime age for first-time home buyers from Ellie Mae, they show that it really comes like 29, 30, 31 is that prime age. So what I think we pick up in Arapahoe County is a lot of people who might have lived in a loft in Denver during their 20s, spent a lot of time in Lodo, paid $2,000 a month for rent there and everything, and then they get married, have a child, want to buy a house and settle down, and it's just natural to move to a place like Littleton in Arapahoe County. One thing of note here, unlike Colorado, is that from about 54 years old all the way up to about 72, there is outmigration of a little bit of the older population that we see here in Arapahoe County too. So a little bit of a difference from that of Colorado. Now, this data comes from a product called the Census Flow Mapper, and this shows the net migration of people where they move to and from on net. Now, the red shows you the most amount of people who moved here. That's about 29,000. And if you look at all 3,200 counties on here, you can't pick up a red one because it's Denver County. And Denver County geographically is a very small county, so it doesn't show up here. And Arapahoe County is also outlined in red, so it kind of just gets washed out there. So I apologize about that. But when we look at the number 2 county for net migration for Arapahoe County, it's Cook County, where Chicago is located in Illinois. Number 3, we just go up the lake a little bit to Milwaukee County, and we see a lot of people moving there. Number 4, we go down to Maricopa County, where Phoenix is, and see a lot of people who move here from there as well. And then it's not till we get to Pueblo that we see another big donor county that gives a lot of people on net to Arapahoe County. Now, the flip side of the equation is people who move out, and those people are shown in blue. And generally what we see is a lot of movement of people from Arapahoe to other places. Boulder is the number 1 place for out-migration. I imagine that's where a lot of those 19 to 23-year-olds are going that we saw in the previous chart, but then we do see a lot going just to Douglas County, a fair amount going up to Weld County. Some of those retirees may be going out to Mesa County there as well. So anywhere that is showed in blue are places that on net Arapahoe County is losing residents to. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the reason why people move by and large is for jobs. This chart simply shows the average number of jobs that we've added per year over a 5-year period. And then the red bars that I had showed earlier were converted to red lines showing the net migration. And periods when we've had the most robust job growth, like the period from 1995 to 2000, also happened to coincide with when we've seen the most migration. The period from 2000 to 2015 ranks as probably the 3rd strongest job growth that we've seen overall. We didn't see quite as strong of migration, though. 2 things I think that caused that. One is we had a little bit of slack from an 8% unemployment rate coming out of the Great Recession. The other is I think we started to get caught up with a little bit higher home prices, and I'll touch on that a little bit more at the end of my presentation as well. Looking at jobs across the county, this chart sums it up over the past 16 years or so there. Starting with the first gray bars, you'll see the number of jobs represented by the green line decline further through to the dot-com bust. They kind of trough around 2003 or 2004, but take a while before all the jobs are fully recovered. You go forward to 2008, that's when the Great Recession essentially hit. We see the jobs again go down a little bit through 2010, but not as deep of a trough as what was experienced maybe throughout Colorado. And then the jobs really come roaring back to give about 405,000 jobs total in Arapahoe County, of which roughly 30,000 are here in Littleton. Looking around the state, where are most of the jobs found? Well, we have about 3.3 million jobs. I broke them out into the 20 different odd industries there and broke it out by color classifications too. The average annual wage in Colorado is roughly $57,000 a year. Those that are shown in green make more than 120% of the average weekly wage, and I kind of showed the range on there with some of those mining jobs and professional and technical services really pulling up that range. Those in red pay lower, less than 80%. Those are generally found in accommodation and food services and retail trade and some of your other service industries there as well. And those in purple, like health services, are kind of mid-range paying jobs there overall. So it gives you an idea of how our 3.3 million jobs are distributed across the state and the various industries and how they pay. This chart, similar thing, but for Arapahoe County. One thing that you notice is that the average weekly wage in Arapahoe County, or average annual wage in this case, at $64,300, is considerably higher than that of Colorado. And I think that's partially due to the mix of jobs. When you look at both your most prevalent industry of occupation, that's healthcare, then second is that professional, scientific, and technical, which tends to be a very high-paying occupation there as well. And then you get into some of the retail trade and some of the lower-paying ones too. too. I think Arapahoe County has a fairly good distribution of high-paying, mid-paying, and low-wage jobs there. But as a result of having some of the high-paying jobs, there will be people that are commuting into those jobs from other places too. Looking across the state, employment change from the Great Recession, we've added the most jobs in health services, second in professional and technical, and then we see accommodation and food, and then some of the other mid-paying jobs right there overall. But only 1 out of 5 jobs that we've added has been a high-paying job overall, which could further exacerbate some of our housing expense issues that we've seen. Looking at Arapahoe County, it's a little bit better. 1 out of 4 jobs has been a high-paying job. And again, we see the health services, professional and technical services, and then financial activities with a lot of the insurance companies and other banks and the like that are operating in that industry there too. Now, this is something that Kathleen touched on just a little bit with her commuting, so I wanted to highlight this just a little bit there as well. The top left shows Arapahoe County. So roughly 200,000 people who are employed in Arapahoe County but live outside. About 100,000 who both live and work in Arapahoe County, that overlapping part of the Venn diagram. And then another 200,000 who live in Arapahoe County but work elsewhere. Now, when we look in the bottom right quadrant, that is the statistics for the Littleton, and that shows that there's much less overlap. So again, that's the about 8.5% or 92% of the 8.5% of people who both live and work here, shown in this very small number of 2,700 people who are fortunate enough to both live and work very close to each other there overall. But for the vast majority of people, 29,000 some people are employed in Littleton and live elsewhere. And then you have a number of your people, about 20,000, who work elsewhere too. So where do most of the other people who live in Littleton but work elsewhere work? Well, Denver is the number one place. 28% of the people who hold jobs in Littleton work in Denver. Littleton's number 2, then Centennial, Lakewood, Aurora, and even all the way down to Colorado Springs with some of them. Now, where do your workers come from? Very similar. Denver again there, and then not too surprising, a lot of your big population centers are the providers of people who are coming here for commuting. So commuting is a very important thing. We need to know where people live, and we need to know where they work. How do we know where people live? Through the census. So I'm going to take a quick commercial break to plug the census right now. The census is incredibly important. Census Day is April 1st, 2020. We might think that's a long way away, but do a little bit of math, and it's just over 13 months away. You can be filling out your questionnaire at about a time 13 months from now. If there's one takeaway that you have from this meeting, it's that the census is important. It's safe. Your answers are protected for 72 years by the Constitution, and it's easy. There's only 11 questions that should take you about 10 minutes or so to answer. It is the foundation of our democracy. Our representation is based upon it. We have the chance to pick up an 8th congressional seat, giving us more power in Washington, taking one of those seats from a Midwest place like Illinois, where people are moving from there as well. But it's also going to help to look at how the city council boundaries are drawn in town representation district there. County commissioners are going to be used for drawing this there. School districts, everything. So it's going to be very important. Funding is imperative. There's over $2,300 per year that is distributed per person from the federal government formulaically based upon these census counts. The census is going to be online this year for the first time. They've actually got into the 21st century here. It's only taken them 2 decades after it started to make it there, but we are here now. So end-to-end test in Rhode Island. More than half the people answered their census questions online. You can do it by phone. In 2010, if you had a problem, you could pick up the phone and call them, and they could walk you through and tell you how to fill out your questionnaire, but they couldn't take the answers for you. That's changed this time. And then you can also do it on the old paper form if you want to do it that way. And God forbid, if you don't answer, you might have to do it in person when an enumerator comes to your house and follows up asking, why didn't we receive a census form from you, and how many people live here, which is going to be very costly for the Census Bureau and taking up your time too, which is more valuable spent doing other things. So our ask is really to familiarize yourself with the census. You are trusted voices in the community. Encourage your friends and family to participate. There's no reason for them not to do so, and there's a lot of money that Colorado will miss out on if we don't get them counted. Let our office know about any meetings or groups like this one that could be interested in hearing a plug for the census, and let us know about questions or concerns that you might hear from your citizens so that we can help to address them. Why is it important to your communities? Again, $900 billion in federal funding annually is distributed based upon this. That's close to $10 billion in Colorado every year, or $2,300 per person. Funding everything from our libraries, our community centers there, senior services, special education, roads, grants that we get. So if you want to make sure you get the full amount of funding that you can get to realize that transportation plan, we need to get the full accurate count of the citizens that you have here so you can get all the dollars that you're entitled to there as well. So really imperative that we get a complete count. Anything that our office can do to help, we'll be willing to do that, but we're really relying on you as trusted voices in the community to help encourage the quick answering of those census forms too. So I know you're feeling like you're getting older by the minute listening to me up here, but I need to tell you a little bit about aging. It's a point we drive home. I'm going to talk about aging, housing costs, then we're going to open it up to a conversation a little bit here and some questions as well. This is what Colorado looks like. Our 5.7 million people throughout the state. It's one of my favorite charts that we have because every one of the people in this room and every person in Colorado is represented here. If I want to find myself, I can go to the green Gen X, go to 42-year-olds and see that there's roughly about 70,000 or so like me. But look back a few years younger, about a decade younger, look at those millennials. There's roughly 90,000 of them, rising higher than any other group on that chart. We do see the impact of the kind of baby bust recently that we've seen with fewer children under the age of 10 that are showing up there as well. But one thing you really want to call your attention to is those purple bars. Those are the baby boomers, which appear to be the best represented generation in this room right here now as well. And that is the real reason why we are aging there. We don't have very many boomers that are passed to the right of that black line over the age of 65. But if we look to the left, and especially right about those 58-year-olds right now, they rise higher than any of the other boomers. Just flash forward 7 years and they're all going to be hitting 65 and nearing retirement, which could cause some workforce needs. Now, if we look and contrast this to Arapahoe County, if I didn't change the label at the top, you might not know that we changed it, or look at the scale of the axis of the number of people, you might not catch that. Arapahoe County does look very similar to Colorado. Mostly millennials as the most popular generation, not quite as many Gen Xers, and a really good representation of baby boomers, and still missing some of those children there as well. Now, if we look at this chart, this compares Littleton in blue and Arapahoe County in green. You do see where there are fewer children in Littleton as a share of the population, 0 to 9 and even 10 to 19, than there is in Arapahoe County there in general. The places where the blue lines rise up higher than the green bars happen to be in some of the older populations there as well. So it's no surprise when we look at the median age, Colorado and Arapahoe County almost identical, about 36 and a half. But Littleton about 6 years older in median age. And when we're talking about median age, 6 years is a glacial amount of age or time right there. So it's a really big amount of time when we look at that, where half of your population is over 42 years old, the other half is under 42, whereas statewide and in the county, half is under 36 and the other half is over 36 there as well. So again, it's really the baby boomers that are driving our aging. We're not like a Florida or an Arizona. I showed you that net migration. We get a little bit of the pre-retirees, but it's not like people getting their gold watch and then moving off to the places where the sunsets are beautiful and the weather is warmer. No, the reason why we're seeing such fast growth is those baby boomers. We are seeing the third fastest growth of the 65 plus population nationally in Colorado, and yet we, on the other hand of the spectrum, only have the sixth lowest share overall of people over the age of 65 plus. We're about 14%, but if we look at Littleton, it's north of 17%. So again, 3 percentage points might not sound like a lot, but in our eyes, it is pretty big right there. So we have about 1.2 million baby boomers that are in the state. Again, they were born between 46 and 64, and they are celebrating birthdays, lots of them over these next decade between now and 2030. As a result, we'll see our senior population grow by about 50%, up to just over 1.2 million as well. And we'll look a lot more like the nation in Colorado here. We're in a transition from being a relatively young state state. Again, sixth lowest share under the age of 65, to look a lot more like the nation, where about 18% of the population is over the age of 65. Looking at the growth rate of the population in Colorado between now and 2025, the all ages population is growing by about 11%. Those millennials are only driving that peak working age population growth 1 percentage point more or so faster than that. But when we look at the 65 plus and the 85 plus, they are growing twice as fast as the all population group right there. So it's a really fast growing segment of our population there. And one I think it's important to acknowledge. Arapahoe County, even more pronounced. Population growth in Arapahoe County is projected about 9% between now and 2025 by our office, but we're projecting nearly 3 times that much growth in the 65 plus and 85 plus population as well. So it's really something that to be prepared about. I think it's going to be something that comes up in your comp plan and the like there as well. And I think it's something you all know about already too. Aging issues, I already covered the numbers. They can be an economic driver. We look at retirees as a big economic driver. They never lose their jobs. They have their health care paid for, and they're no longer saving for retirement. So they have a very high marginal propensity to consume, which we like as economists right there. Housing is going to be very interesting, though. Do we have the right universal design? Do we have enough sidewalks overall? Do we have the price points right there? We're going to have a baby boomer that's downsizing from their bigger house and bringing a 6-figure check to closing of a house they're putting an offer on, and yet we'll have millennials coming in with a 3% down first-time FHA loan. You only have to wonder who that seller is going to be more inclined to how much offer they're going to take there as well. Income will see downward pressure as we move to fixed incomes from our highest earning years, which tend to be between 45 and 54. We'll see more issues with health and disability, especially over the age of 85, and that dovetails into some more need for transit and other services like Access-a-Ride and the like that are provided through RTD. Public finance should see downward pressure. One of those things could be on fewer sales tax dollars being spent because more money is being spent on non-taxable services such as healthcare. And it could even be a senior homestead property tax exemption that with people who have lived in their same house for more than 10 years and are over the age of 65 currently get that. The state makes the county whole for that. But if the state isn't as good of a budget year, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen about that. And it's really important to have an aging plan, work with your local area agency on aging to have that as well, and work within your city councils and the like there too. Nationally and across Colorado, our ethnicity and race diversity is increasing. In 1970, our state was very white. We were over 80% white. The red bar of Hispanic, not very big, just over 10%. And then African American and Asian making up the difference. By the time we get to 2010, we were at about 72% white, roughly 22% Hispanic, and then the difference right there being Asian and African American. But by the time we get to 2040, we'll only just be slightly more than half white. Our Hispanic population will be about a third of our population, and then our Asian population will see a little bit faster growth there as well. If I tell people if you want to see what we're going to look like in the future, you just need to go into our schools. And if you look right now, our under 18 population across the state is nearly 50% persons of color or non-white right there. Will grow up to nearly 60%, and then that's only going to be the older generations that are in the future in 2030 that aren't going to be majority minority, if you will, there. One of the reasons why our office is very concerned about this is the educational attainment gap that we currently see between whites. And if we look at whites who are 25 to 34, we don't start tracking educational attainment until you're 25 because you are still going through. You really haven't reached your educational peak until that point in time. But about a 60%, 65% educational attainment for a white 25 to 34-year-old versus a 35% differential or 35 percentage points lower for a Hispanic population. So if we don't continue to close that gap, we're going to see lower lifetime earnings. We're going to see problems with affordability and the like there too. So that's something that our office looks at quite a bit. It's not as big of an issue in Littleton because you don't have quite as much diversity that we see statewide. But if we look at Littleton schools, two things things that come out. The white is shown in the orange bars here, and it has declined by about 1 percentage point overall. And most of that growth has been due to an increase in Hispanic population. And even though a lot of people are choicing into Littleton Public Schools too, you can see the overall enrollment numbers have declined just slightly over the 5 years that are shown in this period. And this data comes from the Colorado Department of Education. It's kind of a fun way to look at what our future looks like there overall. Last couple slides, I'm going to touch on housing and housing costs, and we'll open it up to questions. Our median housing value in Colorado is $348,900 in 2017. We leapfrogged New Jersey to become the 5th most expensive housing market in the nation up there, and the most expensive housing market without a coast. So you can kind of see the new, Grand Lake just doesn't cut it, unfortunately, sometimes there. But you'll see California, New York, Washington, D.C., and even Maryland represented with very high housing costs. A lot of our neighboring states with lower housing costs, and even much lower there when you get into the South there as well. One of the reasons why our housing costs have increased is because we haven't built enough housing stock recently. The number of households that are formed are shown in the blue line here, and our housing units that we've added are shown in red. We did have a bit of a surplus that occurred in the 2000s, and so then the builders kind of pulled back a little bit after the Great Recession, which was kind of a housing-led recession. And then we saw really a dearth of new houses being built, and a lot of household formation. It was about an 8-year period from 2008 to 2016 where we were absorbing a lot of those households that were vacant and other things there too. And now we've actually got to a point finally this last year where we added just slightly more housing units than we did new households. But it's going to take a long time for that imbalance to correct and for those problems of housing affordability to kind of solve naturally through the supply side there. Looking across our 64 counties, this has a 5-year average because I had to go to that to get the Littleton data, and I had to get to that for any county that's less than 60,000, which is the vast majority of our 64 counties across the state. So San Miguel County, where Telluride is, stands out along with Aspen, Pitkin County as being the most expensive parts of our state. But our median average over this 5-year period was about $286,000. Arapahoe County just slightly more than that, but Littleton considerably more than that at nearly $340,000. Now, mind you, this is a 5-year average from 2013 to 2017. So our today's dollars of a median value obviously going to be much more expensive and much higher than what is represented on this chart, but this just lets you see that Littleton is even more expensive than Arapahoe County is in general for housing costs. One thing that has not been trending in the right direction, shown in the lighter blue, is the average annual household income in Littleton, adjusted for inflation. These are all in 2017 dollars. It fell throughout the 90s there and then kind of rose a little bit after 2015, then kind of reached a low point in 2010, and then has been tracking up again since then. It is greater than Colorado, which is shown in red, but even Colorado, really no real wage growth when we adjust for inflation since 2010, and even nationally too, with the average household income being about $60,000, no real growth adjusted for inflation. And that's problematic because we want to look at what the value of a median home is compared to what a median household income is and divide those to get an idea of the relative affordability of a home. So if we take nationally and look at that, a median housing price, let's just call it $220,000 roughly, and then we divide in that $60,000 income, we're going to come out to about 3.6%. So our 3.6 times. So it's going to take 3.6 years of a median household income to afford a median house price, median priced house. Flip-flop those two. Sorry about that. Now, if we look at Colorado there, with our higher home prices overall, whether it be the 350 that we call it there on our most recent ones, or even the 290 or so on a 5-year average there, and then divide in our roughly $70,000 a year that an average household earns, we come out to about 4.6% or so for our number of years of median income. Now, when we look at Arapahoe County and Littleton, it's even more exacerbated elevated is the problem right there. So it looks a lot more like our expensive areas of the state, and really is one of the things that's driving our affordability problems that we're seeing, is that we've seen a tremendous rise in our house prices. Median house prices are up about 80% over the past decade or so, since 2009, whereas our income has only grown by about 10%. So that really makes people have to stretch themselves, be at a place where they're putting more than 35% or 30% of their household income toward their housing cost or rent cost right there, and really being in a position where they are house poor in that respect, and spending too much of their budget on that. And then when you throw in transportation on top, it can really eat up a lot of their income overall. So I think that's a big issue that we're looking at across the state. Summarizing, we're really seeing disparate growth across the state. We've had about a third of our counties that have lost population, and they've moved to places that have been thriving economically, which basically runs the gamut from Colorado Springs all the way up to Fort Collins along the I-25 or Santa Fe 85 corridor, depending on how you want to call it there. We are seeing slowing birth rates right there as well. Part of that was due to the Great Recession, but it hasn't rebounded like we've expected. We're gradually aging, and there's many implications on that, as we have baby boomers who are going to be leaving the workforce. Do we have the right ability to attract new migrants to fill those jobs? Will they be able to afford a house here, and as well as a job that allows them to afford that house? We're seeing increasing racial and ethnic diversity, although it's increasing at a much slower rate in Littleton than it is both in the state of Colorado and in the metro Denver area. And really kind of one of the things that we're talking about with this comp plan and master plan is just how everything is connected together, from our population to our jobs to our education to our future workforce to our housing and daycare, and then most importantly, when that transportation plan goes out, our infrastructure that we have there, bringing it back again to the ability to attract population and making it a vibrant community and a great place to live there as well. And then lastly, another plug for the census, the importance of getting that complete count so we get all our dollars there and we really have a good denominator to use from 2030 on to track our growth over the next decade there as well. So I know I won't have a chance to get to all of your questions today, and I apologize about that, but I do want to leave my contact information up here on the screen as the last slide here. So I do encourage you, most of all, go to our website on the bottom. A lot of what you saw was here. You can go to the fifth bullet point down on our webpage, create your own community profile and do one specifically for Littleton. A wealth of information. Some of the slides that you saw in this presentation are shared in there as well. My phone number is right above there. I always welcome a break from a spreadsheet or a database to talk to a great citizen of Colorado. And again, you can shoot me an email there too. So I really thank you for the opportunity today. I look forward to taking some of your questions, and I apologize in advance if I don't get the opportunity to. Please grab me afterwards or shoot me an email or give me a call. But thank you very much. Yes, sir. Wait 1 second. Wait for the microphone. My apologies.
Your summary mentions a rising birth rate, slowing birth rate. What about rising death rate? Because the baby boomers are really going to be busting in about 10 to 20 years. So how do you account for that? I mean, are you going to be building infrastructure to accommodate baby boomers when in 20 years they'll be gone, and you may have to support those facilities that are no longer necessary?
That's a great question there. And the question again was, our death rate is rising, and I showed that on the natural increase where we've gone from fewer than 30,000 people a year who are dying to nearly 40,000 right now. And we project that to continue to increase right there, especially as our population ages. And I think, similar to our housing stock, unfortunately right now we don't have an adequate supply of 55 plus communities, of nursing homes, and of places for people to age in place. So I think that it's going to take us a number of decades to build to that point, to where we get to them. And then when we look at the way cycles work in births and everything, we see the peak of the baby boomers. Most of the baby boomers were born between 1957 and 1961 there. So they kind of came at the tail end of the baby boom. But those are, between the ages of 62 and 58. So we'll be building for them when they'll be going into nursing homes. Really kind of we look at that 85 plus population. And despite the fact that we're going to see a lot of them dying off, that 85 plus population is continuing to rise at a rate that's 3 times faster. So, to be honest with you, I think since we're starting in a position of a deficit where we don't have adequate supply of assisted living, nursing homes and the like right there, I think it's going to take us a time to build them. And I'm not too concerned that we will get to a point where we have an abundance or an excess supply. And if we do, there's always a chance to look at repurposing some of those buildings, rezoning them, and maybe changing them to a different type of living situation. But a wonderful question right there. We'll go to the back of the room, and then I'll come back to you for a follow-up.
Along the same line, what would you happen to know what percentage baby boomers live in Littleton? I know a huge percentage are aging in place.
And on that, I wouldn't know offhand. I know that like the 65 plus population is higher than that of the state, 17% and some change. But that's going to change quite a bit because the bigger wave of that baby boomers are kind of that's 58 to 62. So it's going to continue to grow and evolve right there unless we see another baby boom coming. And we do have that in our forecast as well. When we look kind of going back to that life cycle, again, when we go basically 30 years after the baby boom ended, we had the millennials. And the millennials, there were 4.3 million millennials who were born in 1991. We contrast that to just last year, and we only had about 3.85 million babies that were born. So 500,000 more millennials that are now 28 years old who are just now entering their childbearing years and everything else too. So we do see the birth rates coming back a little bit right there. But the number of births, the rate is still slowing because not every woman is still having 2 or more children. Some are electing not to have any or stopping at 1 there as well. So a good question. I don't know that specifically, but I can try to find that for you too.
Chris, there were 2 slides that you showed that I think were net migration, but the data were from 2000 to 2010. Do you have any estimates about what they are for the last 10 years?
That's another great opportunity for me to plug the census. And it's kind of a fun math problem right there. So we know with the census is the denominator. So when we had the last census, we had about 5,050,000 people who were in Colorado. We have wonderful records from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, CDPHE, that give us the birth certificates for every baby that is born to a Colorado mother, and then the death certificates for every Colorado resident who passes away. So when we get our 2020 data that we have for the population, we'll be able to look at how many people we had in 2010, age them all forward, subtract out those who died, add in those who were born, and then the difference of that is going to be our net migration. So we do have some estimates based upon American Community Survey data that surveys about 3.5 million households across the United States there. But really, those are just kind of best estimates based upon a sampling. But when we get that universe, that complete count from the census, it's going to give us that great opportunity. So we have some from IRS migration data looking at where you filed before, but some people who are over the age of 65 might not be filing their tax return, and not everyone's filing it. Some dependents might not have shown up on a tax return a year ago, and then they were born in the state and then moved here, so we'll miss them. So not all that data is perfect, so we're really looking forward to getting our hands on the census data on December 31st of 2020 when it's delivered to the president.
Make my way.
Thanks. I heard you talk about net migration and natural trends in population. Do you have data on household size and family types, and how the trends have evolved in that, and how that affects the number of housing units with respect to people?
We do. And one of the things that we've seen is that household size has been larger than what we had expected. Our average persons per household is right about 2.5 people. You know, we can fine tune it a couple tenths one way or another depending on the year we look at or the location that we look at there. But a couple of trends that we expect. We expect to see households becoming smaller in general right there. And part of that is due to our aging population, as we have a number of people who are either widowed or divorced as they age there as well. And so we'll have a number of people who are living on their own. So we do expect it to eventually decline a little bit more. Our expectations haven't been met with the data of late. One of the reasons that we think is that there's a lot of pent-up demand for household formation due to the fact that it's going to be close to $1,500 to rent an apartment, or a house that costs $400,000 is going to take a number of years to save up for in order to get the down payment and to move into that house. So the numbers of persons per household are above where we anticipated them to be, and we think some of that is due to economic pressures, people doubling up, but then it could also be due to some trends. Maybe some seniors are doing things like home sharing, where they're helping to have a younger person live with them at a discounted rate to have help with maybe just simply companionship or help getting to the doctors, help keeping up the house there, things like that too. So it's an interesting question to see how we'll evolve on that. Will we kind of go more like a Japan, where we'll see more multi-generational living, or will we be more people living alone in studio and one-bedroom apartments, or in continuing care facilities and the like there as well?
There's a question. Oh, it doesn't amplify. Just for the recording. Just for the, oh, good. Then I can change it. You, as a department, and you personally, are interested in the question being potentially added to the next census. And I'd like you to comment on that issue.
That's a great question, and I think I did have something prepared on that, and I do. So census is going to be 10, hopefully, maybe 11 questions, depending on how it comes out. So we're going to ask for your name. We're going to ask for the phone number in case we need to follow up with you. We're going to ask for your age so that we can really get that good information on aging. The citizenship, I think, is kind of what we're dancing around a little bit on the question right there. And it's still pending right now. So there was a New York state court case that ruled kind of in favor of Colorado, who sued the Census Bureau for having that on there. And one of the concerns was that we would have an undercount of our population due to a large number of perhaps unauthorized or undocumented residents who live in the state who might not be willing to answer the form right there, but that's still pending. The justification for it was, well, it was on a number of previous censuses up until about 7 decades ago or so, and then it has been on the American Community Survey. So it's interesting, and I do think there's value on it for the American Community Survey. I was given this similar kind of talk at a Denver class, and I said there are 560,000 people of voting age in Denver, but only there are 500,000 or 504,000 who are eligible to vote. Now, a number of them are students who are here on green cards, people who are here legally. So what we don't know is we don't know a lot about the about the legal status of those people, and it's not a legal or status or not question. It's the question, are you a citizen or are you not a citizen? I do have some concern about that. I do think that it could lead to undercounting if it is on the census. But the other questions that we see up here that we know will be there are your Hispanic origin, your race, your relationship to the householder, which is very important there to know about non-family households that might be living together, your sex, the tenure, whether you own or rent, and then the number of persons that are in the household. What are the questions that we had there earlier? And does the person normally live or sleep somewhere else? So we're trying to capture where people live or sleep most of the time. But, I encourage you to visit our website if you want more information on it. Again, we have a lot of great information. I appreciate you bringing that question up. I think our office in general, we were part of, our Attorney General did sue the Census Bureau and the Department of Commerce for that. We joined in over a dozen other states who also were in on that suit. And so, when you look at the $2,300 per person per year that are distributed formulaically based upon that, if we had an undercount of 50,000 people or so, which it might be estimated at, that would really have a negative impact on many local, state, and county budgets there overall there too. So we want to make sure that we can get the most accurate and complete count possible. And our office is of the opinion that having the citizenship question on there could be detrimental to our efforts in getting a complete count. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Chris, you've given us a lot of historical data, and I appreciate that. The comprehensive plan is looking in the future, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Can you give 3 specific examples of the data you presented today and how it's going to impact Littleton in the next 20 to 30 years?
That's a great question, and I'll just kind of show you what we're thinking from our office for the next 30 years. So between 2018 and 2050, we expect the state to add roughly 2.5 million more people. We project that our population will grow from about 5.7 million now to about 8.1 million people in 2050. And if we look, where do we think that growth is going to be? Well, it's very similar to where we've seen a lot of the growth over the past 7 years or so. And those are really stand out in counties that are highlighted in a shade of dark brown. And I kind of have them listed up here too. So we think the most growth is going to be in Adams County because you have a little bit lower housing costs there as you go up Reunion, Commerce City, and then a lot of room to grow out along I-70 there as well. We do see Arapahoe County adding nearly 188,000 people, and I think a lot of that is going to depend on land use plans, zoning, and the like. Are we going to look for continue to want to have a lot of single-family homes, or do we want to permit more multifamily and the like there as well? And then you kind of just see some of the other places, but we anticipate more growth in Arapahoe County than in Denver County, and we work closely with a lot of the planners in each of the county levels with the Denver Regional Council of Government to ask, okay, where are your build out? How much water do you have? And we try to make sure we get all those taken in here. But I think if we look at Littleton, what can we project for it? Well, we know that it is older than the state and the county in general. So I think that it is going to experience some of the impacts and implications of an aging population a little bit sooner than the rest of the state there does too. We know it's a very attractive place to live, and I think as we see population growth in Weld and El Paso and places that are further out on the periphery, that if you have a place that has a wonderful downtown, that has a lot of character, that's close to a light rail line and a good bus line, that it's going to be a desirable place to live. So I think there will be a number of people who will continue to want to live in Littleton. Unfortunately, we don't get down to the municipal level for our population estimates. Unfortunate for a group like this, fortunately for my colleague Cindy, who only has to do the 64 counties and not the 272 municipalities as well. So I think that kind of hopes to give you a little bit of the answer, but if you want to ask a follow-up, I'll give you the chance, and I'll get to the gentleman behind you for his follow-up as well.
Okay, you base those projections on some kind of model that you've developed. Have you validated the model with your historical data, looking back in 1970 and saying, if I was to put the projections of the model in 1970 numbers, can I get to the 2010 actual population? Have you done that?
Yeah, we vet that. We are part of the FSCPE, the Federal State Cooperative for Population Estimates, and FSCPP for Population Projections. And Colorado has one of the most accurate history of projecting. Cindy, who I mentioned earlier, has been doing it for 25 years. So we really have a good amount of history doing that. And really what we look at two things. We look at population by single year of age, so we can kind of really get a good feel for how many people are dying. We update our mortality tables based upon the most recent data that we get from the Centers for Disease Control and from from our CDPHE. We look at our number of women who have childbearing age and try to project out fertility rates from that as well. So that kind of gives us our natural increase. That is probably the easiest thing to do. It's kind of the two certainties in life, death and taxes. Death we know about right there. It's going to get all of us there. Births, kind of a little bit more variable, but we do know people tend to start families and, settle down at a certain point in their lives. The part that is the more difficult is part that I work on and where I project that we'll grow about 1 million more jobs and that we'll have to migrate in a lot of workers like we historically did, bringing people like me who was born in Chicago and raised in Ohio to fill those jobs there as well. So that's where we probably have the most potential for error is if we hit another really weak patch like we did in the mid 80s here. I wasn't around at that point in time, but one of my friends likes to say you could walk out on 17th Avenue or in downtown Denver and shoot a gun off and not hurt anyone because it was that much of a ghost town at that period of time. So that is our biggest risk is if we really had a localized kind of downturn that occurred here, or if there just continues to be less mobility that occurs nationally, fewer people moving, then we might not pick up quite as many of those jobs or people. So that really the wild card is the migration, and that depends on a number of things from tax policy to home prices to water. But if we look at the way sea levels rise or could rise in the future right there, with 40% of our population nationally living in a coastal county, if we do have more rapid sea level rise, people might move to the high country a lot more rapidly than we think, and 8.1 million could be a low-end estimate there, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and unfortunately our crystal ball is in the repair shop right now. We hope to get it back here before the 2020 census, so we have a better idea of how that's coming out. And a follow-up question there for you as well, sir? Sorry.
Just one other thought on that. I was thinking more in terms of housing supply with the sort of a glut occurring as the older population dies off, but more specifically in another vein, a limitation, you're quite correct about rising sea levels, but we may have declining water. And what limit, how far can we grow in terms of our water total statewide capacity?
That is really, I think when we look at our water, it could be really an allocation issue. When we look at the amount of water that we have across the state, the vast majority of it, I think it's 87%, goes to agricultural uses, the rest to industry. So on our household level uses, it is not, that big of a player. It doesn't even really rank at hardly the top 3 there at all. And we've become very efficient at, doing water restrictions there. We didn't need to build Two Forks Reservoir way back in the day. Denver Water is making it with what they have with some of their reservoirs, but it is a very salient question. I think a place like Littleton that likely has some senior water rights and the like there.
We gave that to sold that.
Okay. I'm glad I checked. But if you're working with Denver Water right there, that helps you as well too. So wanted to check on that. But water is something that we always talk about there, and I'll kind of show you this kind of our risk that we think. Our national growth, if that slows down, our national policies, if we really are restrictive on immigration, that's going to slow us because of our 2 million that we added last year, almost half of them came here from abroad. Housing, just like you mentioned, do we have the right location, the right type there? And is our infrastructure adequate? We've been underfunding that for a long time, not raising our gas tax in the state since 91 there. State and budget policies. What are the implications going to be of things that we did in 1982 like Gallagher, 1992 like Tabor, 2000 with Amendment 23, and that taking bigger and bigger pieces of our budget and putting them toward subsidizing our property taxes, toward keeping down our amount of taxes that we are paying on and having us to vote on any tax increase, which might hamstring our budget, our aging that we've talked about quite a bit there, and then, our industry changes. If we have automation, that means that we need fewer people to fill those jobs, and then kind of that natural disaster and climate change. So I think these are all things that we're cognizant of, and I think they can counteract each other in some cases, or they could kind of overlap and exacerbate them too. So some things that keep us debating around the water cooler at end there in the office, but really glad to hear that it's conversation that you all are having here as well, and it seems like it's really a salient point and a salient topic there too. Get your steps in.
I have a couple questions. Does your office contribute to or collect information about individuals experiencing homelessness?
We will get that through the we will get that in the census because we'll look at persons who have non-typical living arrangements. So whether they're in a motel or a campground, and we have been working a lot with the census recently. We've done the local update of census addresses. We've updated or corrected over 60,000 addresses in the state to make sure we have those. We are designating places where a lot of transient populations live as group quarters. So if you think about some of those like motels off of Colfax and other places where they might have a high number of long-term residents, we are designating them and helping the Census Bureau see them and the like too. And then we, within DOLA, also have a division of housing. We have a dedicated homelessness program, and a lot of our Dolomites, as we call ourselves, will go out and work on what they call a point-in-time survey in that. So, my office, State Demography Office, not directly, but under the umbrella of the Department of Local Affairs, and especially within the Division of Local Housing, we do a lot of work with that. And our point is really to help the Census Bureau identify where a lot of those transient or hard-to-count populations would be, so that we can get a much better estimate of people who might not be adequately housed or sheltered there as well.
Are these specific slides going to be available?
They should be available. I think I sent Kathleen both a PDF and a PowerPoint, so she should be able to post them all up there as well. I cut out some of these risks and everything, but I might have to rearrange them and bump that back so we could put them on, since it did come up in conversation there too.
And then I have one more question. I don't know if Littleton wants to answer this, but does Littleton have a plan for the census? Are there efforts? Is there money that was sought to support that? I'm just curious.
What a timely question. Actually, the census was in my office last week. So myself and the mayor met with them. And yeah, we're looking at some strategies to try to get specific organizations kind of coordinated here so that we can get the word out. Faith-based organizations in particular seem to be pretty effective for that. So yeah, we just started that conversation.
Yeah, we call those local complete count committees. We have a statewide complete count committee that our office helps to chair. But really, when you look at where the trust is in government, the people trust the government the most at the local level, the least at the federal level. So if we can get that buy-in and have your city manager and have your mayor and council members, and especially persons in the faith community, people who are of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, to really reach out and get those trusted voices to say, yes, it's important, you need to do this, and if you need help, we'll help you do it there. So yeah, look for information on local complete count. If you want, I can give you a card and we can link you up with some more of that too, because we want active, engaged citizens. I think it's wonderful, the 80 citizens who are here tonight and being actively engaged. I love the questions that we got. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this forum. I thank you again, Kathleen, for having me up here. And if we don't have any more questions, I'll hand it back over to Mark here.
One more.
Oh,
One more.
okay.
Just in reference to that last question, that last census, I worked with students from Littleton High School through the Realtor Association because we were not able to get much census done in the section of Littleton that has a highest immigrant population and non-English speaking people, and that would be between Bellevue, Littleton Boulevard, Windermere, and Broadway. And they were afraid to answer the census, or they couldn't read it. They thought maybe it would lead to them being deported and so forth. But the students, they were not fearful of the students. The Bemis Library has an immigrant center in it, which is wonderful, and we help people learn English and get their citizenship. So we're working on that.
That is a great point. And libraries are some of our best partners around the state. With the increased responses that are going to be online, libraries have that great internet access that we have. Many of them have that 1 gig coming in, or more rural parts that don't have the great access. And then you also have the librarians who are trusted there too, and then the either refugee or immigrant centers. So I think that is a very key point. I think that is one of the best things to do, is find out what your best practices were in 2010 or 2000 and build upon them. I was a census crew leader up in Avon in 2000. And, Avon has a mobile home park that is, right by the school there, very heavily Hispanic and Latino population. And a lot of the people on my staff who I'd send in there who looked a lot like me would come back and say, gosh, it's too difficult to do. And I was fortunate I had 2 high school students who were working with me at the time. They were both fluent Spanish speakers and had friends, relatives, everyone with the community. So I just basically asked for their assistance to go in there. And, it's amazing that it goes back to that trusted voice again that we have, and someone who just looks like you, who knows you, and can just address many of those concerns that, no, you're not going to be deported because you answer this. ICE is not going to have access to this or anyone else for 72 years after you answer this question, because it's protected by the U.S. Constitution and Title 13. So those protections are paramount. I think that we all know them. To someone else, it might not make any difference right there, Title 13 or 72 years or the fines they'll like. But, the fact that says that, we did it, we need this money, we need to have our, persons of color and our minorities represented and show what component of our population they comprise. And if we miss them, then they are going to be missed for the next 10 years there as well. So it's imperative that we do get that complete count. Thank you.
Let's give Chris a round of applause. I'm going to jump in here, Kathleen, just a couple of thoughts here. And I hope you found this interesting. Hopefully it sparked maybe a couple of questions. I want to kind of tie this back to the comp plan and why, I believe some of this is probably very relevant. So, for example, when we recognize that we've got an aging demographic, a little higher than perhaps what we see in the county, what does that mean from a transportation standpoint? What's the strategy? What's the level of investment that we need to make? What type of investment? Where are we going to place that? So to me, that's one of the questions that we're going to try to address in the Transportation Master Plan. And again, Chris kind of pointed out that if with an aging demographic, so what's the future land use? What is it that we think we need to invest in to perhaps be prepared for that? So how does that all connect to one another? The other thing I thought was kind of interesting is that one of the charts he was showing was that we had about an 8% of our population that actually lives and works in Littleton. So what does that mean then if we were to somehow try to increase that percentage? Because right now what that means is you have a lot of people coming into Littleton to work. So that translates into traffic congestion. We pay for that. We pay for that in the level of transportation improvement we have to make. So if we somehow change that strategy and look to somehow increase the amount of people who are able to live here, what is that? There's certainly a cost to that housing, socially, economically, but also then there's a cost that perhaps we save in the transportation system. So that is a very typical question we're going to be wrestling with here in our comp plan process. And so I hope this evening was stimulating and sparked some other questions. So Kathleen, do you want to kind of wrap us up here?
All right, so I just want to express my thanks to all of you for attending this evening, and then just ask one favor. In each of your seats, there was an evaluation for tonight's presentation, so we would love to get your feedback, particularly because the best part about a series is that there's more to come. So we have 3 more sessions planned, and we would love to incorporate that feedback as part of our understanding. Because again, this is something new that we're doing here at the city as part of Envision Littleton. We are continuing to keep our website up to date. We basically are going to go through 5 phases through the course of this year as part of the comprehensive planning process and the transportation master plan. We are squarely in phase 1, which has been a lot of research and data collection. We'll look to conclude that with a draft report of what we will call existing conditions here in the city in mid-March. That'll go to a study session of both City Council and Planning Commission on March 12th. So then we'll have a good sense of where we are and be able to move into those future phases of really looking at what the future of the city could look like. And in many ways, that becomes an opportunity to do some scenario planning, right? So you can kind of push and pull the levers and see what the results are, see if that still feels and looks like us, or if we need to make some adjustments based on what we learn. And then we'll, of course, much as Mark talked about earlier, get a sense of then what can we afford and what does the cost look like for both of those planning efforts. I see one question back here. Yes.
So when is the goal, what date are we planning to finish the comprehensive plan?
So phase 5, we are looking at adopting the plan October 15th is the date that we've set. So one of the things that we have a great benefit of is that we've done so much work in the community last year to really understand the unifying vision and guiding principles. So we're able to embrace a lot of that momentum that we had from those processes and really create, similar to last year, an incredibly robust community engagement process because we're blessed with a lot of community events through the summer. So we have the opportunity to be in front of a lot of folks. Yes.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is if we're, trying to promote the census to be completed, wouldn't it behoove us to take a look at that data, a year later and see if it puts more meat to that comprehensive plan?
Yeah, and I think that that's something that naturally happens for cities. One of the most important best practices is really updating these plans on a very regular cycle. So being able to have that plan, being able to be part of regional conversations about funding in particular, both having an updated comprehensive plan. We have a couple of advantages that we'll look at. Our region will look at a MetroVision plan that they look at on a 10-year cycle. They'll start opening that process towards the end of this year. So the best input that they can get for a planning process like that, looking on a 2050 horizon, is really solid local plans. So we couldn't be in a better moment to try and offer up both that to the regional conversation, but also take advantage of other data points and really start to look at what the next steps are in terms of implementation. So,
last question. Are we looking at another community that's similar to ours that already has a master plan, a comprehensive plan that we could, use their template?
Mm-hmm. It's funny, we've actually had the opportunity to interview somewhere in the ballpark of about 15 cities that have just gone through recent comprehensive planning and transportation master plans. Some have done them at the same time, similar to how we're approaching that, and it really has come across as a best practice. We've been able to have conversation with them both about the planning exercise, the types of work that their consultants have done, the emphasis that they've put on certain elements of that planning, but then most importantly, where the best practices have been in terms of engaging the community, because I think that that's where we really wanted to go above and beyond. And I would say, based on our experience with the vision, the people of Littleton are incredibly generous with their time. The numbers that we had in terms of that level of engagement far exceeded any of the cities that we talked to over the course of getting started last year. So with that, my small favor again, that evaluation, and I really want to thank you for your participation this evening and for joining us. So thank you again.